Hey, everybody. So we're going to explain antibody production. So we already distinguished between antigens and antibodies. So we talked about how macrophages work, right? So here's a big white blood cell, and on the surface of the white blood cell is something called an MHC complex, and it will present the antigen that used to be on that bacterium. So just to review real quick, so let's say we have a bacteria, and then on the surface of that bacteria were these orange, I'm making them orange, little round proteins, antigens. Macrophage will eat it, it will break it down and present the antigen on the surface. So the first player, if we want to think of it that way, is a type of lymphocyte. So remember, we talked, there's two groups, there's leukocytes and lymphocytes. This lymphocyte is called a T cell. So the T cell will come over and it will recognize this antigen. They communicate with each other. This T cell will then travel over to another type of lymphocyte called a B cell, and it will share that information. So it binds or interacts with the surface proteins in here and will send information to the nucleus where the DNA lives, right? And it will begin producing globular proteins specific for that antigen. And these are called antibodies. But before it does that, when it gets that message, it's going to divide into two B cells, and then they're going to divide into two more B cells. So you get this army of B cells that are going to be very specific. They're going to produce very specific proteins, very specific antibodies for that specific antigen. So this is called clonal selection. So if you want to think of it, it's basically the T cell has selected the B cell, and the B cell becomes clones. My pen isn't working so good. And these will start making our antibodies. So antibodies, if you remember, they're Y-shaped. They will have little binding sites specific for that antigen. These types of cells that make the antibodies are the B cells are called plasma cells. They're like, Mr. Fleming, why do we need two names for the B cells? Well, the reason we do is that as this B cell is dividing to be clonal plasma cells to make these antibodies, it also will go a different route, and some of these B cells will divide and they will become something called memory cells for the next time you're infected by the same invader. Yeah, and that's antibody production.